strategic outline case. Mr. Leader, I think you're dealing with this, with the appropriate officer, which may have some of the Mr. Mercer and Mr. Calvin. Mr. Mercer, remind us what your position is these days.
I'm Deputy Director of the Children's Services.
Deputy Director of Children's Services.
Assistant Director of Commercial Services.
Assistant Director of Commercial Services. Councillor Harper sends his apologies. This evening he is meeting with local authority school governors, so something to join us. The report has been tabled to members. I'm sure members have had a chance to read it. I thought I'd ask the leader if he wants to add anything to it, and then we move just very briefly to the leader, and then we go straight into questions. I would say to officers at the outset, this took, although it was a long report, it took some reading, mainly because I had to translate some of the paragraphs into English. And, you know, I have to say to officers, and not just the officers before us, I suspect all officers of this council, you know, members do like to think, never mind the general public, we like to think we're vaguely informed. We do like things in clear and straightforward English, and there are phrases in here which I have not noticed.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for that preamble, which is helpful. I will, of course, describe this project very briefly. Early intervention in a troubled family is a no-brainer. If you interfere and help them early enough, you can avoid lots of expense in later life. It is clearly a very sensible thing to do. That's aspect one. Aspect two, cooperating with other arms of the state in the borough to help families at an early stage is another no-brainer. This is a very clear and sensible way of avoiding trouble later on, both in terms of criminal justice, health, and life chance outcomes. And in fact, I could leave it there, and I think this as you say, this report could be written in a much briefer style.
Mr. Leader, we're grateful for that. I think all members understand the thinking behind the report, but where does that quite sensible thinking of early intervention with problem and difficult families end, and patronising attempts to manage people's lives start? There were some unfortunate phrases, I thought, in the report before members about achieving states. Is this states of enlightenment? I think that's the Maharishi Yoga, who thought we should all achieve a state of enlightenment. Where do you think this sort of, my point of view is that I don't care how people live their lives as long as they're abiding with the law and not costing us anything as taxpayers, but otherwise I couldn't care less how people live their lives.
Well, I care a little bit more than that. I mean, I take your point and obviously, Grant. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But a light touch help at an early stage means that one can not interfere in people's lives later on. It's clearly a sensible thing to do. I mean, I take your point about being patronising, and we know there are unfortunate phrases in this report that we, as the Minister of Education, will perhaps say we can do better.
Thank you. I was just looking at there's 4 work streams, as I understand this report. I was looking at the appendix. I think it's been amended appendix circulated to members. I'm not quite sure what the differences were. But some of the phrases in the appendix worried me. Particularly, I'm looking at objectives on page 32 under work streams 2, school as a local delivery unit. I'm sure we'd all accept that schools have a vital role to play. But then it tells us in objective 4 that we ought to be a grasp of the latest academic thinking on achieving wider outcomes. In my experience, we need to hear less from second-rate academics at third-rate universities, because that's where the country's gone wrong for the last 50 years. What do we mean by academic thinking?
Academic thinking is, of course, in the eye of the beholder, Mr. Chairman. I suspect your viewpoint there wouldn't necessarily be one that's entirely agreed by the committee or by the world at large. There's an element of truth in what you say, of course, and one mustn't get involved in fantasy. But there is, I'm sure you will rejoice that the Minister of Education education is at the moment returning to a more robust way of thinking about education, and that would have to be regarded as the latest academic thinking, so I'm sure you wouldn't wish to decry that.
Indeed, what a marvellous secondary selection we have, Mr. Leader. Workstream 4, Assets and Deficits Toolkit. You know, I thought a toolkit was the screwdrivers in the metal box, but never mind. It tells us that London Borough of Barnet and its partners are able to track the borough's progress as a whole over time against supporting its residents to achieve positive life outcomes. I wonder, somebody could tell me what positive life outcomes are. I thought death was a positive life outcome.
So that is the most
Death is the only positive. But what's a positive life
It's
outcome?
not necessarily a positive outcome if one's judgment goes to hell. I would say that death is a certain outcome. However, we can measure outcomes if people don't go to prison, if they do stay in work, and they do have a happy and successful life, then that is a positive outcome.
So I'm not sure how you measure a happy, successful life, but never mind. Can I ask some practicalities, and I'll bring other members in? You list on page 18, anyway, under workstream 1, partner organisations. Community Barnet, what do we think they can deliver on this one?
Community partners are, of course, an important partner organisation in the borough, and they have had a good record at times, a bad record at other times, but I'm sure that in the future they will be very useful to us in the way that they do deliver services. I mean, they are helpful people.
And the other one was the Church of England over the regeneration of Stone Grove. Sadly, the relationship in this borough between us and the Church of England, particularly in relation to some failing schools, has not always been that positive. What guarantees have we that they can deliver on this project?
Well, the Reverend Simon there over at Stenberg, I would say, was a first-class cleric and someone who I've enjoyed discussing matters with, and he certainly is a pioneering minister in a difficult half parish. He's doing a good job, and I think we can all be grateful for his work there, and I hope that other clerics will take his example and avoid interfering in public matters and get on with engaging with the populations in their parish.
Excellent. I'm delighted to hear that people of Stone Grove are so positive, but unfortunately the GPs in this borough appear not to have been as positive. Surely they're a key partner.
If I may, through the chair, the list on page 18 is a list of partner organisations who were interviewed as part of the research to generate this report. Efforts were made to interview GPs as part of this. Unfortunately, in the time we had available, we weren't successful in doing so. I believe, in part due to the level of change at the moment, which they're dealing with in preparation for the changes in the health service. But your point that GPs are an absolutely vital partner when it comes to early prevention is completely correct.
Councillor Moore?
Yes, I mean, I've got a couple of comments to make, and then I'll start the questions, but I'm sure that we'll be back and forth with these.
I wonder, to be helpful, if we could take it with 2 questions, and then I will take comments after the questioning.
Well,
if that's helpful.
That's fine. It was a general comment around the fact that it's a hugely, well, I think one needs to be systematic about it. I tend to agree with your comments about the very techy, slightly mechanistic approach to it. And so I think that was not always helpful. There's a huge question that sits over all of this work, and I understand some of the aspirations, but we are later going to be looking at budget planning, which predicates a whole set of quite significant budget cuts. So across children's and early intervention and prevention, we're looking at service cuts or budgetary cuts of 3.78 million across the board. And part of that is looking at, for example, just pull one out, the cuts to those, the support for those children with extreme behaviour or mental health issues. I'm a school governor, probably should have declared this at the beginning, and so I'm very conscious of how that impacts currently within individual schools, the challenges that creates, both in exclusions, but actually in terms of function. So that leads me to a question that I don't disagree with early intervention. We've discussed that in the past, under my watch as well. But the issue is, how do you balance managing your existing load and need against your interest in early intervention, so that you've got a whole set of families and individuals within this who are past the point of early intervention? How are you going to maintain the level of support that will allow them to manage, at the same time as funding early intervention with a view to avoiding those costs in future? Because quite frankly, in this paper, it's all predicated on the early intervention and a set of parallel budget cuts. And my concern is that you're not going to be able to marry those two within this context. And I say that from previous experience, for example, with special needs and behaviour management in schools, and that's only a small part of this project.
Can I ask Mr. Mercer to come in, please?
Yes, of course, it's always going to be a balance between investing into work which is essentially medium and long term in order to reduce the costs involved in supporting those families with their needs and giving them, let's say, more successful events in their lives. Of course, the work we're doing directly in family support, family focus work, has been significantly helped by a grant from government for the Troubled Families Programme, which is not the name we tend to use with the families, of course, but is what the label on the grant is.
What do we call?
Family focus.
You used to call them toxic families.
We call it what? Family focus? Isn't that for
No, Chair. The team that works with the families is called the Family Focus Team.
And why do we call troubled families?
Because when working with families, the experience has shown that labelling them to them as being troubled is not always helpful in terms of the relationship one's seeking to build with them to help them through the difficulties in their lives.
I'm sorry, I interrupted. Did you get an answer, Councillor?
Would you like to, is there anything you'd like to add to that? Because I am genuinely very concerned about the level of cuts that are part and parcel, are working in parallel with this. And I understand your aspirations, and there's a lot that's positive in the paper. And I'm very much committed to making a difference in a range of families' lives, because I think ultimately it's not about what we will save, but it is about the better lives and more productive lives that people will have if you're able to help them navigate some of the challenges early on. But I come back to the example I use with children who have extremely challenging behaviour. And the challenge that one has now actually in getting support through the school system, and the fact that actually you're going to have a massive cut as part of that. I hope you're right and that we are able to manage that, but I have to say I have some significant reservations about that balance at the moment, and some of that does come from experience. The second question I wanted to ask was around partners in delivering the new service. Now clearly the Chair has touched on that already. Are you looking at private sector partners? Are you looking at voluntary sector partners? And if so, which? I know some of the work is already commissioned through Home Start. Which I thought was slightly ironic, given that the same arguments that you're using now for early intervention were those that were being used by Home Start 7 or 8 years ago for their grant, and actually it was dismissed out of hand as being a justification. So I did think that was a rather interesting turnaround. But I would like to know who you think are going to be the partners in this, because clearly GPs are struggling with this, and my guess is that you're going to struggle with engaging more schools in it, because you are going to have a more and more diverse family of schools. And how can you be assured that those families will engage with the projects? And I do know you've got a head teacher involved with the panel, I recognise that, but she's not representative of all of the schools.
I mean, Councillor Moore, of course, raises an interesting point, but there would be no ideological problem indeed using the private sector for this. Indeed, of course, we revere the general practitioners and we refer to them as part of the NHS, but of course they are self-employed practitioners in many cases and part of the private enterprise system.
Councillor Rayner?
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Coleman. I'd like to give you the opportunity to exclude Middlesex University from the comments about Trowbridge University.
Get on with it, Councillor.
Thank you. You touched on patronising families, etc., involving them in early intervention. I've been to many members' training sessions on this subject, and I've always been very, very impressed with the officers and the very expert and understanding way that they have looked upon the topic and the way that they are going to approach it. But those two early comments, I would like to pick up on some of the things which Councillor Moore has raised. I'm concerned, and maybe this is when we come to discuss a budget, but really what we're trying to do is spend money now to make savings later. We spend money in early intervention now in order that we'll have less trouble later on. But of course, as Councillor Moore says, you have continuing, I was going to say troubled families, but that do you and I, they don't know they're troubled. Troubled families keep coming up time and time again, and they will this year, next year, and the year after. So this early intervention budget is, we're going to have to continue to spend it in order to reduce the problems subsequently. So really my question is, how are you going to square the budget? And what presumptions are made to come up with the future savings which are forecast?
The presumption has to be, of course, that we have got it right when we produce a budget. I mean, we believe it's right, we believe it's safe, we believe it's the right way to proceed. But we must remember the level of cuts that the Council is facing, that if we don't cut this, we have to cut something else. The financial situation is not easy, naturally, and that is reflected in the cuts we delivered locally.
But if we don't get this right, then we're going to have to spend more money on the troubled families later on.
That will be the problem. That's why we are so keen for this to work and believe it will work and are putting money into it.
Mr. Mercer, you looked at
Clearly the work in of the Family Focus Programme and the Troubled Families Grant that's funding it, the assumption is that there is a significant backlog of families to work with, and over time that number will go down. Thereafter, logic tells us there will be a stream of families because families in this borough are not static, they move in, they move out, and likewise families develop problems where they've been staying before, and so we need to manage that stream of families, and clearly we're making plans for that. This particular one project is about looking even beyond those plans to what else we can be doing in terms of early intervention other than our very focused family support work.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to pick up on the resources for work stream 2, and I will declare an interest as Councillor Moore did that I'm a governor.
School governors is not an interest.
Only reason that's
raised
is in the knowledge that there are a large number of very good schools within the borough. We've got the head teacher included, who's head teacher at an academy that I don't believe is in Barnet, and there's an academy, so therefore not under the control of the council. Is there a reason why there's one choice taken?
Yes, it was the old choice.
Is it the old Edgeworth?
Still no choices, yes.
Just wondering why we chose an academy rather than a school that we maintain.
Because we haven't got any secondaries left that we maintain, have we? Haven't got academy status? And we're a very pro-academy, Councillor. Sorry, is that your question?
That's all.
Oh, I assume because we think academies have the right way forward. Is that correct, Mr. Mercer?
Shall I say
Mr.
yes?
Leader?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Gordon?
Could you say a little bit more about how schools are going to be affected and our relationship with schools, particularly private schools? Are we intending to get involved and intervene and monitor what all the schools are doing right across the borough in this particular area? Number one. The other question is about the troubled families. Do we take the view that the ideal family is a family with a mother and a father living together?
Can I answer the second part of your question first and decline to give an answer to that? I think the ideal family is very much in the eye of the beholder. If I may leave it like that. As regards interfering in private schools, I don't believe that the borough should be doing that. I mean, obviously the private sector is a very important part of the education system in Barnet and educates a lot of children without expenses to the taxpayer, which is a plus, but it doesn't fall under our...
Except, Mr. Leader, I'm sure you've read Deputy Prime Minister's Commission on the riot report, where there is a line about the need for fathers in families. And I know that's something I suspect many of us will endorse, that families do need fathers and positive male role models. That's certainly the Deputy Prime Minister's rights commission. But I don't want to go off the tangent.
I'm not going to go off the tangent because actually there is a key children's service partner in autism in here. Actually, I had a conversation just today with a group of professionals that was around the recognition that certainly through casework, but also through work I did when I was the member, recognising actually that there is a quite significant proportion of marriages that break down when children's special needs in school are not well addressed. And actually they become families with a real level of need. And actually we worked through the National Autistic Society with some work 10 years ago doing the review precisely because we were getting families who were disrupted by a failure of the system to help them.
Councillor Schneider. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, obviously we all agree with early intervention, although there's a reference on page 6 to like open heart surgery, which I think is probably a bit late for early intervention. So it's seeking to empower someone in chaos to move across the boundary towards order and happiness. Pity troubled families open heart surgery. But that wasn't my main question. My main question was, £250,000 is being spent just to draw up a business case on early intervention. What are we actually getting for that? How can that be justified when that's stacked up against cuts to youth service, cuts to children's centres, mental health, and other practical, cuts to these vital services that are detailed throughout the budget, and then we're spending £250,000 just to draw up a business case?
Councillor Schneider, I think you might be one of the first examples that we didn't have a proper business case and that we hadn't done the work to show that we were on the right path. And that's the political answer, and I'll say that's
Yes, I think I've already answered this to some extent, Councillor. This is about investing for the future. We are expecting that this investment and the business case it develops, and the work that arises out of that will give us levers to achieve significant savings in the future.
Yeah, I understand the invest to save approach, but what are we actually getting for the £250,000?
I'm through you, Chair. As is specified in the report, there are 4 work streams which have specific levels of each of them. What they are quite different. Some of them are looking at making sure we understand best practice across the country and implement what is worthwhile. Some of them are looking at work with schools, which was discussed before, which, if successful, we hugely implemented. Others are looking at making sure that we can map and follow success and failure over time. But the underlying point, and I think the underlying answer to your question, is that this is a huge prize for the individuals involved if successful in having them living successful lives, and also to us as a council in terms of saving significant amounts of money. However, nationally it has been shown that it is very easy to spend a lot of money on seemingly attractive but ultimately unsuccessful initiatives in this area. And I appreciate the amount of money spent making the business case seems a lot, but it is actually avoiding the temptation to run in and try 20 or 30 different initiatives, none of which may be successful. There is now sufficient evidence around the country about what works and doesn't work in early intervention, that spending this money will allow us to do the right thing. If we didn't create a proper business case and we just threw this money at doing the intervention without preparing, the odds are we would make a number of very costly and wasteful errors, finding through trial and error what's successful. So that's the underlying point, which is this is an area which can provide very, very big savings and very, very positive outcomes for the people of Barnet, but choosing the wrong projects, focusing on slightly wrong areas, could waste a huge amount of money for the council in the future.
Thank you. Can I just ask Councillor Cornelius to answer my question about how, if we're spending this money on early intervention, how can you justify the cuts that are being made in other areas of early intervention?
I just wonder whether that might be more appropriate when we do the budget, Councillor Schneiderman, if you wanted to time.
I'm sure I was going to
I mean, as long as you don't ask that same question again.
No, I won't ask that one.
well, in many ways, it's an invest to save.
Cutting money.
No, spending the money on the business case.
No, how can you justify the cuts to children's centres and other areas of mental health and emotional needs health, which are vital parts of early intervention? So you're cutting parts of early intervention and then do a report to see how you can spend money on other areas of early intervention.
But that is the nature of government at whatever level that one has to make a choice, and that is the choice we are making.
Right, okay. I've seen Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councilman will touch on this to every extent that I can. One of the problems is it seems that you focus the target on the very bottom, but then what tends to happen is that you don't have the focus on people who aren't necessarily the worst case scenarios, who are not quite in the troubled families or whatever case, but people who do benefit further down the line. And part of the problems that Councillor Schneiderman highlighted are that resources for them are the ones who are going to lose out. Are you not concerned that further down you'll have problems with people who are not quite at that stage now, but will, could fall into it later on?
Councillor Mitchell, of course, that is a decision one has to make, but surely it must be best to intervene in the most troubled families and in an attempt to mitigate those who are troubled in later life. It is a choice that we are making and setting out here.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chair. I have several points on that altogether.
I'd be grateful.
Right, first thing is on page 10 is the separation of staff costs and external costs as consultants. And I just comment that it's very consultant heavy. We don't provide much officer time, particularly senior officer time, for 36k, which is there, I suspect, and that's a matter of concern for that balance.
I would someone to answer a specific point about that specifically.
Thank you. It's important to note in that balance that those figures don't include what I call below the line officer time. So a significant amount of officer time, especially senior officer time, and effort is being put into this project that will not cost the council, will not cost the taxpayers above and beyond our standing revenue budget. So what you're seeing there is a request for funding above and beyond. And yes, in the main, we are looking to bring in skills which we don't have in-house, and consequently that's why a lot of the money is the external spend. So the nature of the fact that we can get our officer time for free in the main means that you see a seeming imbalance there.
Sorry, can I just ask people in Public Gallery to take a seat? I'd be most grateful if people in Public Gallery would just sit down, because that would just lead to a more orderly conduct of the meeting. Thank you. Councillor Cook?
Well, as has been pointed out, this is investor save, and the costs come earlier and the savings come rather later, much later, I suspect, and the economic justification goes over many years, does it not? And so in the context of a severely restricted budget and the other cuts which are on the agenda here, I'm just wondering how it stacks up in terms of budget control. I fear it might not stack up.
You might want to put that to Councillor Thomas when we get on to the budget discussion. Councillor Cook.
Okay, the $250,000 which has been mentioned is just to develop the strategy, but the business case, the implementation costs come later and separately, and presumably will be much more. And I don't see any indication here of where they're coming from, and is it grant aid from government, or are we looking at further cuts that are not yet identified in order to fund the implementation? I think that needs to make clear before we get involved in this. Next point is about schools. Schools are not going to be involved in this unless they get extra money, I suspect, because they won't see this for a business or education. And so we need to be very clear about where that extra money is coming from, and whether they are recruiting new people specifically for it, and the length of the contracts, all that sort of thing. The next point is what commitment is there from other public sector bodies? This is supposed to be a collaborative thing. I didn't see from the report too much evidence of collaboration, willing collaboration. I can certainly understand why GPs have plenty of other things on their plate at the moment and might not wish to get involved. My last point, Chair, is that quite a lot of this seems to be generic, and I just wonder how much of the proposed work is Barnet specific and how much is duplication of work which might be done elsewhere, perhaps by national government, perhaps by other local authorities.
My judgment is that the last point needs an answer, but the rest was just comment. I would say to Councillor Cook, as I understand it, the court, perhaps Lee will correct me if I'm wrong, we are just looking at a piece of pre-decision scrutiny on the preparedness of the business case and whether we go out for a business case, and that many of the issues Councillor Cook raises, I have to say in quite a negative way, are issues for much further down the line than just the preparation of a business case. Am I right, Mr. Leader?
Yes.
And the final point that Councillor Cook made, I think, did need an answer.
Thank you. All the work which we'll be doing will be Barnet specific. If we pay for any work, it's work which will be commissioned for us and it will be unique to us. Having said that, we are being very careful to make sure that where there is national research, where that work has been done already, that we are making use of that and utilising it, and doing so as low cost manner as possible. So I can assure you, as a committee, that I have members of staff, internal staff, and consequently on a day rate aspect comparatively very low cost, going through national research and making sure that we're not paying large amounts of money for someone else to tell us something that's already in the public domain. So we are making sure that we get best value of money out of where other people are doing similar research. And
I will take a quick supplementary from Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Chair. First, I'd just like to take a slight issue with Mr. Garen. Actually, the report says that the staff do have the skills, but they don't have the time sufficient within their work plans to do it. So there is a particular statement in there that comments on that. But it may refer to another of the papers, but I remember that when I was reading. I've got two particular comments to make. The first is referring to the move from the project work, streams 1 and 2, through to 3 and 4. And we've got within the paper 3 and 4 have only just come into scope. And so I just want the comments on how realistic some of the projections, financial projections are, given that you're only just beginning to scope those projects. And a related point to that, as you move, work streams 1 and 2 would be in principle completed by the end of the year, is what I understand from the time frame. 3 and 4 will be starting through that process through the spring. We're looking at potentially, if there's an outsourcing of the NSCSO project, presumably some of your observatory and data, which will be coming from that, you'll be calling on that through a period of transition and flux. So I want to just have your assurances or your comments on how sound you think your interaction will be through that period. And related to that, whether it's working through partners or through an external provider as part of that NSCSO project, the issue around data, sensitive data.
Councillor, we've also, it's a job, NSCSO.
Oh, sorry, the back office.
That's the back office.
Yes.
Well,
but yeah, I do apologise. I think the epithet is probably quite well known by now. The issue around data, security of data, particularly around vulnerable families, because actually, with all due respect, we've had some hiccups and quite significant hiccups about that in the past. How are we ensuring that data security across the project, particularly with those vulnerable families, with partner organisations, or where there's data being drawn with an external partner? How are we assuring security of that?
Councillor, well, of course, the political answer is that I believe all these the three factors raised, that we are robust in what we are doing. We know what we're doing and we believe we're right. But I suspect you would like more technical answers. I'll pass you over to Mr. Garen.
Thank you, Councillor. We are confident in our costings. You're correct that work streams 3 and 4 will develop later than 1 and 2. However, I believe they are working as sufficiently advanced to be confident in the costings. To address the point on data security, I'm confident that within the project, as visualised up to the outline business case, we will be fine. In most instances, we'll be dealing with very organised data for Having said that, Mr. Mercer, who gave you a fuller answer on very successful work in Barnet over the last 24 months or so around data sharing between organisations. Lastly, your point on the interrelationship between this and the other changes going on in council, it is something we'll have to watch carefully. However, I would like to personally flag that it also brings potential. For one of the things which we've gone out to market for within the OSC contract, the back office contract, is we have asked people to provide better, more up-to-date and more thorough ways of interrogating data than we currently have in-house. It's one of the things we're looking to buy. And my belief is that one option, and it may be this comes back in the outline business case, but one option is that the capabilities brought to us by a successful CSO contractor may provide us with essentially work stream forward, may provide us with a means of tracking the successes and failures, needs and demand over time without any further investment. A long way from being definitive because we haven't done work for the business case and that procurement is not way from being complete. But there is actually an opportunity here that we are buying what we need to do this better than we do right now, which is very positive.
Right, okay. Thank you. Colleagues, are there any comments that any member wishes to make on this item, or are there any specific recommendations that anyone wants to propose that we make to the Capital Resources Committee about this early intervention strategy?
My only comment, we've raised a lot of comments, and I hope that
Well,
the organisation will see all of this.
Or are members happy for the scrutiny manager to send a summary of this discussion for the attention of the Capital Resources Committee? Members happy?
I think we would want to limit our concerns, though, about this happening in parallel with set or significant budget cuts. And
I'm not sure that would be a universal decision, Councillor. If that's something that's proposed, but it's not something that I think...
It was expressed when we raised the issues as a caution around the feasibility and robustness of doing that.
Sorry, are you making a proposal? Because otherwise I intend to ask the scrutiny manager to send a summary of the discussion to the Capital Resources Committee. You are making a proposal. Seconder, thank you. So those in favour of adding that, please. I see those against. That is lost. Thank you.
Will that still be part of the issue?
It'll be a summary. It'll be in the summary of the discussion, but it will not be highlighted over any other point. That's the way these things work.
The way I think we handled it in past council is that it's been clear that those were not supported, but
I was giving you the benefit of leeway, Council. Well, if you don't want the leeway, you want all reference to the budget taken out, then I will happily do that. But I thought I was giving you
I think
leeway.
it should be included in the comments.
Okay, thank you. We now move on. Thank you.